All right, everybody, welcome into the Go 24/7 podcast. I'm Glen West, your senior writer here at the site. LSU ramping up its intensity for its top target on the coaching search trail. We'll talk all about it, all the latest news. We're going to break it all down for you, what we've learned here over the last 24 to 48 hours on a search that has really started to pick up, even going back to late last week. So we're going to break it all down for you here over the next 15, 20 minutes. But before we get into all that, would certainly like, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're following us there, to please like and subscribe, comment, whatever you might be willing to do to help us grow in that space. And then also on the Spotify and the YouTube Spotify and Apple networks, whenever you might be listening to this podcast, please make sure that you're liking and subscribing and commenting, all those good things, as well as we try to grow out this podcast and reach as many LSU fans as possible. So with that being said, LSU is ramping up its search here over the last several days, and certainly that came to a head on Monday as Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss head coach, think it's no secret out there that since LSU made its coaching decision to move on from Brian Kelly and to start ramping up its intensity here to find a new head coach, that Lane Kiffin was going to be the A1 target for LSU. And it was a matter of when LSU would kind of ramp up that pursuit. And we've got some big news to talk about here today, as Monday late morning, early afternoon, plane landed from Oxford, Mississippi. On that plane were members of Lane Kiffin's family, and they took a little bit of a visit, a little bit of a tour around Baton Rouge. They visited some houses, did some different things to kind of familiarize themselves with this neck of the woods, I guess you could put it, as it really kind of looks like to be the next step, or one of the first steps of what's going to be a multi-step process here over the next several days for LSU as they look to land their big fish. I mean, this is the big swing that LSU wanted to take in this coaching search process. Lane Kiffin obviously has done tremendous things at Ole Miss over the last really 5 years. For the last 5 years, they're working on double-digit wins for Ole Miss here over the last several years. They're 10-1 this year. They're well on their way to the college football playoff. And really all anybody can talk about, though, is Lane Kiffin in this coaching search, and really the three-headed monster that this has become between staying at Ole Miss, going to Florida, or going to LSU. And we certainly saw some movement there in all sides of this thing, and we're going to break all of it down. But first off, we'd just like to take you back, I guess, to late last week. I think that's when things really started to heat up here between LSU and Kiffin's representatives and things of that nature. You have those phone calls, you have those meetings, those pitches, and things of that nature. And it really does seem like LSU has ramped up its process here going into Monday in the early part of this week, week 4 of really their search here for a head coach. And a lot of the buzz last week was around Florida. I think that's one of the things that we need to point out here to start, is that Florida is a very big player in all this, and really the ball is going to be in Kiffin's court, right? And I think for me, when you look back at last week and the news that kind of started to trickle out of Gainesville, it was that Florida was going to be a very major player for Lane Kiffin. Certainly, if you're Ole Miss, you're listening to everything and you're catching wind of all this. And I think from everything that we understand and everything that we've learned here over the last several days, Ole Miss has pretty much gone to Lane Kiffin and said, "Hey, we're 10-1 here. We got a great thing rolling. We got a great thing going. We need an answer on your future." And I know the word ultimatum has been put out there. I think it's been more pressure than anything. It's been more of a pushing of trying to figure out where Lane Kiffin's mindset is at in terms of his future in Oxford. I think it's important to note that he has he's maintained his positioning here when asked about it in recent weeks about wanting this contract extension or what his future looked like at Ole Miss. He has this contract extension, from what we understand, on the table for a number of weeks to make him one of, if not the highest paid college football coaches in the country. At Ole Miss, if he were to stay, that has not been signed yet, as we understand, and it's left the door open for things like this to happen. And I think when you talk a little bit and you go back a little bit to the Florida angle of all this, it really started to heat up because Ole Miss was playing Florida last week, and I think that was a big talking point, certainly in Gainesville. And in the days leading up to that game, there was certainly a lot of buzz around that whole process and how Florida was ramping it up for him as well, for Kiffin as well. And I think that it all kind of came to a head Saturday after the game when Kiffin was pretty much asked point blank after the game if he was going to be the head coach of Ole Miss in 2026, and he kind of danced around that question a little bit. Said he loved what obviously they're doing there in Oxford, but didn't give like a firm yes or no to that question when it was directly asked of him. And so then the wheels start turning here a little bit more on Sunday, and then on Monday, Florida, Ole Miss is actually going into their open date today, and so it was reported on Sunday that members of Kiffin's family had gone to Gainesville to kind of check out that side of the coin, tour those facilities and get some more information over there. And then on Monday you hear news that a plane's coming in from Oxford on Monday morning carrying members of Kiffin's family here to Baton Rouge. From what we understand, they like I mentioned a little bit earlier, they toured the facilities a little bit. They toured some houses, maybe not the facilities. They toured the campus a little bit more. They drove around a lot, looked at some houses, things of that nature, just trying to familiarize themselves, I guess, with Baton Rouge a little bit more and what that future could look like here if that was indeed what they decided to do. And so where does that leave us now? Where does that leave LSU now? We're going to dive into that a little bit here in our next segment. I think when you look at all this, and what Kiffin now has to really go home and decide here is, what does he want? What does he want his future to be? Does he want to stay in Oxford? Does he want to carry this through the playoff this year? Because the one deterrent here, and the one thing that we always kind of mentioned with LSU, and knowing that Lane Kiffin was going to be their top target, it was always going to be about, would the timing match up? And I think that has been, maybe the one deterrent in all this, which is like, yeah, we'd love to have Lane Kiffin. We'd love to, go full force at him and try to make him the next head coach. Verge Osbury, the athletic director, was asked several times over the last couple of weeks if coaches were in the college football playoff, would that affect LSU's pursuit of that said coach? And Verge essentially said no, and was very emphatic about that. It was that they want to go out there, they have carte blanche to go out there and find the best head coach available, and certainly that is alluding to Kiffin there, I think, in that question that was posed to him. And so, Kiffin is the 1A for LSU, but the timing was always going to be the trickiest thing to work around, because, you've got, on December 3rd, you've got the recruiting class, the 2026 recruiting class that has signing day. LSU's current class is at 17. And, right now, what Frank Wilson and this current staff have been able to do in holding all these guys as a part of the 2026 class has been really, really phenomenal work. They're in constant communication with all these players. Frank has been asked about it a couple different times about just the messaging and, sticking with LSU in this process. And look, I mean, at the end of the day, 12 of the 17 commits that LSU have right now are from Louisiana. And so it certainly doesn't hurt when you have such a big bulk of your recruiting class that are from this state, that have grown up in this state, wanted to be a part of this program, and are, certainly, moving in that direction towards, wanting to sign here on December the 3rd as we sit here, about 2 weeks and change out from that signing date. So that's the first hurdle, right? That you want to maybe have some kind of idea of what you're going to do with your head coach. But in my opinion, that is far less important as what the real actual big date is, which is January the 2nd through the 16th, which is where the transfer portal window opens. And, that is where a lot of this roster is going to have to be constructed here in the weeks and months to come, is knowing exactly who is going to be entering the portal if you're LSU, knowing all, having some of your ducks in a row for understanding who from other programs are going to be entering the transfer portal that you could potentially attack. And so you want to have some kind of structure in place before that window opens on January 2nd, and for lack of better words, a whole hell breaks loose, because you're going to have so many guys that LSU wants to keep on this roster. You're going to have a lot of guys from other rosters that you're going to be vetting and evaluating and trying to bring in to build a really competitive team for next year. And you want to have your head coach in place. You would like to have some of your assistant coaches and those decisions in place when you head into that period. But the whole thing was like, if you were going to go after Kiffin, you might be having to sacrifice that for this first year if he was going to be coaching in the college football playoff. Well, now it appears that Ole Miss is taking that really out of LSU and Florida's hands, because these are LSU and Florida are the big fish that are still pursuing Kiffin and all this. But they're really, Ole Miss has kind of gone to Kiffin and said, hey, we'd like an answer by the Egg Bowl, which is on November the 28th. Ole Miss plays Mississippi State. They'll have a chance to go 11-1 on the regular season. They would like an answer on their future for their future, and for their for them knowing exactly what Finn's going to be deciding here on in terms of what he wants and where he's going to be coaching next year and for the foreseeable future. So that hardline November 28th date really benefits LSU, if you ask me, in my opinion, because if you have a decision made by then from Kiffin, either, okay, he's not coming, which means we can really start to vet out the rest of our candidates here and really kind of go down that list and see who could be attainable here in the short term. And then if you do get Kiffin, you're in a really good spot, because not only do you have your head coach for the early signing period, but you also have him for a whole month here to kind of get into the building and kind of get things going and have a staff and things of that nature to start building this process out for you when that big date of January the 2nd hits. And that's where LSU is going to have a lot of opportunity here if they were the choice from Lane Kiffin to really hit the ground running over the month of December, to get their staff in place, to have conversations with players. I think that the other question you have to ask here is, if Kiffin does come back to Ole Miss and say, hey, I'm either going to Florida or I'm going to LSU. If you're Ole Miss in that case, like, I think you're just cutting the tide right there. You're cutting ties right there. You're not allowing him to coach in that Egg Bowl. You're not allowing him to coach in the college football playoff. And so that is a major decision here that Kiffin would have to be overcoming. Like, I mean, this is like a big decision for him to basically forfeit a chance to play for a national championship or make a run in the college football playoff, because you're jumping ship to another school here, and you have to have that decision made here over the next couple weeks. If Kiffin maybe calls Ole Miss's bluff, for example, and says, hey, I'm still not willing to make a call right now on my future, then Ole Miss is going to be backed into a really interesting corner here of saying, okay, well, if you're not with us completely, do we still allow you to coach in the Egg Bowl? Do we still allow you to coach in the playoff? This has a chance to be really, really interesting stuff here over the next 10 days in regards to how Kiffin and Ole Miss handle that situation. And so, but it does sound like we're going to have some kind of clarity here, whether it's a matter of days or if they take the full 10 days leading up to that game to really make that decision, to make that call. And I think this first step process here of Kiffin's family coming to Baton Rouge, of them going to Gainesville, this is the early stages of a process here that are playing out. And if you're Ole Miss and you're watching all this play out over the last 48 hours, it's hard for me as a fan, if I'm an Ole Miss fan, not to go to the place. Well, he's he's maybe already checked out. Like, I mean, if they're actually going to these places and they're taking visits and they're touring other campuses, that would really, really rub me the wrong way if I was an Ole Miss fan, and certainly if I'm an Ole Miss booster and an administrator and things of that nature. Like, this is the most successful run of Ole Miss football that they've had possibly ever, and they're on in the middle of one of their best single seasons ever. And you're all anybody can talk about is whether or not the head coach is going to be here in 2 weeks, and that's just going to be really interesting to see how all this plays out. I think from an LSU perspective, all you can really do right now is continue to make your pitches, continue to make your push, because the ball is firmly in Kiffin's court. Like, this really does feel like it's down to three options here. He can return to Ole Miss and sign the big long contract extension. He can go to LSU. He can go to Florida. Like, those are the three options here that he has in front of him. And I think in LSU and Florida's case, they're going to make the money work. Like, whatever it takes to get him involved or get him on board, whether that's raising it from whatever the reported number is right now at Ole Miss. I believe it's $13.5 million. That's been reported. That's been out there publicly. That Ole Miss has a $13.5 million per year contract on the table for Kiffin to sign. I would imagine LSU, or actually I shouldn't say I imagine, I know LSU and Florida would probably have to exceed that number. And from what we understand, LSU would be willing to do just whatever it took to get him on board, because he is their big fish. Like, this is the big swing that LSU wants to take right out of the gates of this coaching search. If they're able to get Kiffin on board, they're going to be ecstatic, I think, with that decision. And because they think that he's somebody that can lead them to championships. And he's proven to be one of the great offensive minds of his generation here. He's built successful offenses at Ole Miss for several years now, top 10 level offenses, top 5 level offenses at Ole Miss for several years. He's recruited the transfer portal extremely well. He's had top 2 or top 3 classes in the transfer portal while at Ole Miss during his time there. And then, the other angle to this, though, too, is the recruiting side, the freshman recruiting side, the high school recruiting side. Like, there is not a much better recruiting base than what LSU has in Louisiana right now. I mean, they are, they consistently show that they're able to, this state is consistently able to show that it puts out talent every single year at a wide variety of position groups. And, if Kiffin were to come on board here, you would expect that to really take off, and really, especially from an offensive side of things, really take off. And I think for me, the thing that really could generate a lot of the interest from Kiffin's side, and has generated a lot of the interest from Kiffin's side, is the fact that you can combine that transfer portal success that he had at Ole Miss with the recruiting success that LSU's had over its tenure here, and make something really special work. Because LSU, for all of the faults and things in the last 5 or 6 years where they haven't been as successful, they're still consistently recruiting top 7, top 10, top 7, top 6 classes on the freshman side. And then you saw this past year that they're willing to invest from an NIL perspective on the transfer portal side. So if you're able to find the right coach and get the right pieces into this program that coach can build around, they have the resources. Like, it's all there for LSU and for Lane Kiffin to have success. And then you also have some really interesting pieces who are already on the staff at LSU that could work and work really well with a guy like Lane Kiffin. I mean, Frank Wilson and Lane Kiffin worked together for 1 year at Tennessee back in 2009. Frank Wilson has obviously gone on to carve himself as pretty much the godfather of Louisiana recruiting here for LSU. He's done tremendous work over the last decade when he's been in and out of the program as their associate head coach, as their running backs coach, as their recruiting coordinator, whatever his title might be. And he would be a great resource for a guy like Lane Kiffin to come in here, continue that Louisiana in-state recruiting at a high level. And certainly, if Kiffin were to come, he could bring on his own level of expertise. He'd obviously bring in his own people and things of that nature as well. But there are some people here that I think he and LSU would want to push for to potentially keep on staff. And Wilson would be one. Personally, I think Corey Raymond would be another. I think the secondary and the cornerback room is probably LSU's biggest strength right now in terms of young, developing, ascending talent. And they have some really interesting pieces coming in from this upcoming recruiting class. And Aiden Hall, who's a safety. They've got Havon Finney, who's one of the more talented 2026 cornerbacks in the country as well, reclassified from 2027, where he was, I think, number 1 or number 2 in that class for a good portion before reclassifying as well. So they have talent in the cornerback room. Corey Raymond would certainly be another Louisiana guy who has so many ties and roots to this state that you'd want to keep if I were LSU and if I were an incoming head coach. But all those decisions will be made in good time. And really the thing that I just want to leave here saying is that, the ball is in Kiffin's court. And, I think at the end of the day, all LSU can do is continue to make their pitch, continue to show that interest and have the open line of communications. But at the end of the day, this is going to be what Kiffin ultimately decides. Like, I don't think this is going to be something that comes down to money. I don't think it's going to be something that comes down to resources from LSU or Florida or Ole Miss's perspective. This is going to come down to what Lane Kiffin wants in his life. And I think from a purely football perspective, LSU is clearly the best option of these 3 jobs. But it's much more than just football that comes into play when these coaches are making these decisions. And so it'll be very interesting to see kind of what happens here over the next several days and even weeks leading up to that November 28th deadline, which has been widely reported that Ole Miss would like to have an answer from Lane Kiffin on what his future is going to hold. So we're going to get out of here with that. I appreciate everybody listening. We're going to continue to follow this story by the hour, by the day. And we'll have all the updates and all the information for you guys as it comes out. And we'll be on the message boards, giving all of our thoughts and opinions and analysis on everything as it breaks as well. So stay tuned. This isn't the end. This is just the very beginning of what is going to be a very interesting process here as LSU makes its push for the big fish, for Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss head coach, to try to become the next head coach of LSU. They are going to try to make that big push here over the next week or two, and we'll see kind of how it all plays out. But for now, I am Glen West, and thanks for listening and watching the Go 24/7 podcast.